Thank you, Barry. My name is Steve Thomas. Myself, along with BB, are going to be talking about Microsoft Purview Audit Premium and how it is differentiated from the regular audit product that we have here. So when customers are looking at their retention and preservation policies in Microsoft 365, the audit retention policies can depend on the information governance policies, government or industry regulations, and whatever their security needs are. Now, audit in Microsoft 365 by default includes retention for 90 days. What audit premium can do is it can allow you to retain these audit logs for up to 1 year. And that's very helpful because the average time to detect and contain a data breach is at 287 days. Now, in some cases, that's not going to be long enough. So the optional add-on SKU can increase retention for up to 10 years. Now, this add-on option is particularly helpful for customers that may have additional audit log requirements. For example, HIPAA requires a retention of audit logs for up to 6 years. Now, just to recap, the Microsoft 365 Purview auditing solutions, we have Basic Audit, which gives you log and search for audit activities enabled by default, thousands of signals, thousands of audited activities. It's a 90-day audit record retention, and it's accessible by GUI. You can use PowerShell commandlets to interface with it. And of course, it's also got an API. Now, Premium Audit will give you, again, the longer retention of audit records, but you also have custom audit retention policy capabilities. You get high value crucial events and a much higher bandwidth access to the Office 365 API. Now, at the end of the day, this is an incredible forensic tool that can allow you to look into a whole bunch of different types of information, primarily mail, which includes mail items accessed, mail send. These events can help investigators understand if a mail item was accessed through mail sync, mail bind operation, if a user is sent, replied to, or forwarded an email message. This event is particularly helpful to organizations with regulatory obligations that require breach notifications. Using the mail items accessed event, a security or forensics team can identify and scope which mail items may have been compromised. Now, this knowledge and audit evidence can also help reduce fines and penalties in case of a data breach. Investigators can use a send event to identify emails sent from a compromised account. And we've got all kinds of information here, including internet message ID, subject line, and if the message contained attachments. And when BB starts to actually demo this stuff later, you'll get to see this stuff up close. In addition, these insights, if you're leveraging Microsoft Teams, these events provide insights into various Teams activities, like when a user, app, connector, or a channel has been added, removed, or updated. In particular, this can be helpful to understand when a user has been added to a team that might have sensitive data, or when a particular user read or sent a message. And then, of course, user search, which the search query initiated events are triggered when a person uses Outlook to search for items in a mailbox. This is whether using the desktop client, OWA, iOS, Android, or SharePoint and home sites. This information and insight can give investigators, security teams, or compliance officers the information that can be crucial in understanding who accessed what and when. Now, Audit Premium provides crucial events monitoring that can help you investigate possible breaches and determine the scope of compromise. Around 30 Microsoft services will send user and admin activity to actually audit. Now, in just a moment, we're going to walk through a couple of scenarios where using audit can help security teams better understand what happened at a data breach. Audit can provide information such as what IP address, what IP address and location did the attacker log in from, what emails did the attacker send from the compromised user accounts? Did those emails contain health information or PHI records for patients? Were any SharePoint sites or teams, actually, compromised? What teams activities took place? And of course, the most common, who read or modified confidential documents? And then, what searches were performed in email and SharePoint? A full comprehensive solution for auditing Microsoft 365 services. Now, with Microsoft 365, customers have a full platform, and IT teams can go to one place in order to access insights into user and admin activities across 30 plus Microsoft 365 workloads. And with this, there are three general capabilities that can be used to power your forensics and compliance investigations. You can uncover additional events supporting forensic investigations, to dive into things like, mail items, user search, Teams events. If you have to go back and look at events that may have happened for several years ago, if you're involved in some type of ongoing, long-running, legal issue, and the high bandwidth access to the data. This is enabled through the Audit API, and it gives you, double, the baseline bandwidth for getting this information much quicker and easier. Now, how would you use Audit in a real life scenario? Well, the two probably most common types of scenarios are forensics investigations and responding to legal requests. For forensic investigations, examining the degree of the blast radius, assess the scope of the data breach, to access audit logs to support the length of the investigation. And in the case of responding to legal requests, if it involves, financial investigations such as insider trading, bribery, or corruption, legal forensics such as IP information or information leaks, intellectual property leaks, and thefts, all of that is available. And let's look at a particular example here. Now, in this particular case, the names have been changed to protect the innocent here. But we're going to take a look at a typical example from the healthcare industry where a hospital has been the victim of a data breach. Now, in this case, an attacker was able to compromise the account of a user at the hospital and use their account credentials to steal data from emails and files that the user had access to. Now, once the breach is detected, there is a regulatory obligation to report it, unless it can be proven that sensitive PHI data was not compromised. Without forensic tools to understand the scope of the data breach, the organization has no choice but to assume all data, including PHI that the user had access to, was breached. And they will have to notify everyone whose PHI was assumed to be breached and avenues for redress. But with the help of Microsoft Purview Audit Premium, organizations can identify precisely what data was accessed by the attacker. This lets the hospital determine the extent of the breach and whether it contained PHI or not, and not the level and the level of notification or reporting required. And in this particular case, we can understand what emails may have been read by the attacker. What time frame when the attacker had access to mailboxes. To see if the access info, as in like the client used, the IP address session or user ID, matches the attacker or a regular user. To check if the is throttle toggle is true, to mean that all mail for that user may have been compromised. And then, of course, use internet message IDs of emails access to check if they contained sensitive data. Using mail send events, this, for the period of compromise, gather information on the attacker using the mailbox, such as IP address, identify what messages were sent by the attacker especially outside the organization. And of course, you can look for metadata such as subject, attachment names, and sizes to understand the scope of the data exfiltration. Using user search queries in Exchange and SharePoint, you can use a time frame when the malicious actor compromised the account and look for user search events for email and SharePoint files. Use a query text to gain insights into the intent behind the attack and any sensitive data being looked for by the attacker. And then, of course, match sensitive files accessed by using the file access and modify events. Now, in addition to forensics investigations, as we kind of dived into how you can look at that granularly and get a good grip on the blast radius of those forensics investigations, you also have the capability of using Audit and Audit Premium to respond to legal requests. And this is where Audit Premium is especially helpful, because you may be involved in financial investigations such as insider trading, bribery, corruption. It's, you know, it would, and then furthermore, you can combine audit with e-discovery in Microsoft 365, and then you really have a powerful tool in identifying who accessed what data and when, and what can be relevant to legal teams, lawyers for criminal or civil cases. Now, we're going to look at another example again where the names have been protected, names have been changed to protect the innocent, or maybe not so innocent. So we're going to look at an example where a US-based multinational pays bribes to secure supply chain contracts in an Asian country. Now, over several years, a US-based employee, and again, over several years, made improper payments to non-approved individuals. Now, a search going back 10 years can identify emails sent to non-approved individuals, which would then be able to facilitate a more in-depth investigation. One thing that is important to note is that many companies and industries have retentions of at least 1 year. For companies meeting those retention needs, keeping those audit logs on hand is important. The 10-year audit retention logs enables longer-term access and cuts down on the time and cost of extracting via the API and storing in an external storage solution. Without multi-year retention to understand the scope of the data breach, the organization would not have ability to identify when corruption began or to determine the scope. But with the help of Microsoft Purview Audit Premium, organizations can identify precisely what data was accessed by the employee and meet their legal obligations. And of course, finally, and again, BB is going to walk you through this as well, setting up Audit Premium is a very straightforward process. It involves just setting up advanced audit for users, then enabling the logging of the critical events, then setting up your audit log retention policies, and then it's there when you need it, whether it's to perform investigations, postmortems, investigate data breaches, and of course deal with potential legal and regulatory issues and investigations there as well. So with that, I am now going to pass it over to my colleague, BB, to now talk about this firsthand and let you see this all in action.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Steve. That was very helpful. Hi, everybody. Today, I will be showing you a demo of how to set up Audit Premium and how you can use Audit Premium to perform forensic investigations following a data breach. Now, Audit Standard is enabled by default for most Microsoft 365 organizations, whereas Audit Premium is not enabled by default. So the first step is to set up Audit Premium for your users. Audit Premium requires an appropriate license assigned to the users. And also the advanced auditing app or service plan must be enabled for those users. So let's verify these prerequisite steps first. Let's go to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center And then I'm going to click on users. So here I can see all my active users. Ideally, we recommend you turn on audit premium for all users in the organization. But for the sake of this demo, I will configure audit premium for the user Joni Sherman. So let's search for the user Joni Sherman here. This is Joni Sherman's account. Let's go to the licenses and apps section. Here you need to verify that Joni Sherman is assigned appropriate licenses for audit premium. In this case, I have assigned her the license Microsoft 365 G5 compliance, which includes the audit premium capabilities. Let me scroll to the app section below. So here you need to verify that the Microsoft 365 Advanced Auditing checkbox is selected. Now, after these prerequisites are met, the logging of premium audit records like mail items accessed and mails sent will begin within 24 hours. So basically, if you assign the licenses for Joni Sherman today, then audit records for mail items accessed and mails sent by Joni will start logging in the next 24 hours. Please note that you cannot get backdated audit logs for mail items accessed and mails that were sent before assigning the licenses. These premium audit log records are captured after assigning the appropriate licenses.
I need to let you know that I may need to be off tomorrow. They sent my letter home last night.
There are two additional events that Audit Premium provides. The next step is to enable those so that it can start recording these premium events. You can use Exchange Online PowerShell and run this commandlet here to enable the additional premium audit events for the user. So use this set mailbox command and enable the logging of search query initiated by the user Joni Sherman. After you run this command, any keywords or queries that are searched by Joni Sherman, both in Exchange as well as in SharePoint, will be logged in the audit log records. Next, we have to set up the audit retention policies. If you have configured Audit Premium, it provides a default audit log retention policy where Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, then OneDrive for Business, and Azure Active Directory audit records are retained by default for 1 year. The audit records generated in other services are retained for only 90 days. If you want to retain audit logs for all other services for longer than 90 days, then you will have to set up an audit retention policy. To create or modify an audit retention policy, ensure that you are logged into Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal with Organization Configuration role. Then next, let's click on Audit. Under the Audit Retention Policies tab, create a new audit retention policy. Let's say I want to retain all the team's audit log records for 1 year. So I'm going to provide a policy name here, retain team's logs for 1 year. Then here I can select the specific users and the specific Microsoft 365 services for which I want to extend the audit retention period for more than 90 days. Example here, I have selected Microsoft Teams under the record type. If required, you can also select specific Teams activities that you want to retain. And then you can set the audit log retention duration to 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year. If users are assigned a 10-year audit log retention add-on license, you can also retain the audit logs for up to 10 years. This helps meet more rigorous regulatory compliance obligations or helps you conduct longer running investigations. Like Steve mentioned earlier, HIPAA regulation requires organizations to save audit log records for at least 6 years. So for such scenarios, you can retain audit log records for a longer duration. All the custom audit log retention policies that you create here will take priority over the default retention policy. Okay, so after configuring the prerequisites, It is now time to perform the investigation by searching the audit log events. I'm going to perform a scenario-based investigation. Let's say the organization's security team came to know that Joni Sherman's account was compromised. So an attacker gained access to her account and signed into her mailbox from another machine. The security team was able to remediate this incident and they were able to evict the attacker. But now the organization must do a post-breach investigation to determine the scope of data breach. They must find out which emails were accessed by the attacker, whether the accessed emails contained any sensitive PII or PHI information. They must also investigate whether the attacker searched for any specific keywords in the user's mailboxes or SharePoint sites, whether the attacker sent any emails from Joni's account, and whether the attacker deleted any data from Joni Sherman's mailbox. Investigators must also export the audit logs and produce the compromised emails to their legal team. Now, why is this investigation crucial? Well, if organizations can prove that only very few non-sensitive emails were accessed by the attacker, they can save on hefty regulatory fines. But if they find out that sensitive information was breached, then they must report it as soon as possible as per the data breach notification laws. So let's start the investigation for Joni Sherman. The investigator goes to the Purview Compliance portal and then clicks on Audit. Here you can search Microsoft 365 audit logs to find out what the users and admins in your organization have been doing. You will be able to search activities that are related to email, groups, documents, Microsoft Teams, permissions, directory services, and much more. I will be using the classic audit log search interface for this demo. If you are following our Ignite sessions, we have announced a new search interface for audit logs to increase the efficiency of your search jobs. So in future, it will allow you to run concurrent search jobs in the background. You can review the progress of your searches, and you can also save your searches for later references. The new audit log search interface will be available to Government Community Cloud in December 2022. So let's start the investigation here. I'm going to click on Activities. To help you with investigating compromised email accounts, we provide the premium audit event called Accessed Mailbox Items. So with this, you can identify the scope of compromise and you can perform the detailed investigation of compromised items. Now, the goal of using this auditing action is forensics defensibility, so that you can assert that a specific piece of mail data was not compromised. To begin the investigation, you should identify the mailboxes that have been compromised and then determine the time frame when the attacker had access to mailboxes in the organization. So for this scenario, I will search the audit logs for the user Joni Sherman. And I'm also going to select the date range of when the account was compromised, because date ranges will help you narrow down the investigation and investigate much faster. Let's click on search. These are all the mail items accessed by Joni within the selected date range. Now, these mail items accessed event is triggered when mail data is accessed by both mail protocols as well as mail clients. Here you can see important information like the date when email was accessed, as well as the IP address it was accessed from. And these details can help you determine whether the access was legitimate or it's coming from a suspicious IP range. Notice these IP addresses here. Looks like Joni's mailbox items were accessed from multiple client machines. The client IPs here at the bottom belong to the real Joni Sherman, because all her previous activities have been logged under the same IP address. The IP addresses at the top here seem suspicious and maybe attacker's IP address. So let's investigate this further. I'm going to click on this first audit log record here. Now I can see various details and properties of this audit log record. Let's scroll down. Notice this client info string property here. It says user is accessing this email from Outlook web access through a browser. Well, that's suspicious, right? And also notice the logon user ID session. It helps to differentiate the attacker actions versus day-to-day user activities on the same account. So I'm going to notice this and I'll compare it with the real user's logon user session ID. Now under operations properties, you can see the mail access type. There are two mail access type events. One is called the sync and the other is bind. Bind event is logged when a user accesses individual messages. And for bind access, the internet message ID of individual emails will be recorded in this audit log. Whereas sync operations are recorded when a mailbox is accessed by a desktop version of the Outlook client. For this use case, notice that the attacker performed a bind operation. That means they opened Outlook web access and started accessing the emails. So the internet message ID of the accessed mail is recorded here. And you can see that the mail was in Joni's sent items folder. For confidentiality purposes, the contents of email messages are not shown here, but an administrator can take these internet message IDs and they can look up the messages using eDiscovery tool or content search tool. Let me close this. Let's investigate another audit log record from the same suspicious IP address. Here I see several bind operations again. All bind operations that occur within a 2-minute interval are aggregated in a single audit record. And each message that was accessed is identified by its internet message ID. The number of bind operations that are aggregated in this record is displayed in this operations count field here. So in this scenario, it looks like attacker went through 10 different items in the inbox. And I'm going to copy these 10 internet message IDs so I can explore the email content later. Let's close this. This is an audit log record generated from a different client IP address, right? So this is 70 dot something something. This is 168 dot something else. So it looks like Joni Sherman has been accessing her emails on day-to-day basis from this IP address. All her previous activities are from the same IP address. Let's check this audit log record. Notice the client info string here. Looks like Joni Sherman is accessing her emails from Outlook desktop client. And notice the session ID here. This is different than the session ID in the audit log record from the suspicious IP address. Let's scroll down. Notice the mail access type. This is a sync event from her desktop client. In sync operation, since the Outlook client downloads many emails from cloud to local computer, we log the audit event for the mail folder that is containing items that were synced instead of logging individual emails that were accessed. So this is the sync operation that is performed from the real Joni Sherman's Outlook. So I'm not really concerned over here. But if this sync operation was performed from the suspicious IP address, then it would indicate that all her emails in this synced folder was compromised. Sometimes attackers may use Outlook desktop client to mass download emails from a mailbox onto their computer, right? Then they may disconnect the computer from internet and they may access the messages locally. So in such scenarios, your scope of compromise will be this entire synced folder. Anyways, luckily in our scenario, the attacker has only performed bind operation and they accessed only a few emails from Outlook web access. Sometimes when attackers get hold of the mailbox, they impersonate the user and they send emails to others in the organization to get hold of confidential information. And then attackers delete these emails to hide their tracks so that the original user doesn't see those emails in their sent items folder. So it's very important to investigate the sent emails of the compromised user. So let's click on activity and let's type sent in the activities filter. I can now see the exchange mailbox activity for sent messages. This is a premium audit event. It's not available within the audit standard. Let's select the date range and click on search. Here we have two audit records for sent emails. Notice that an email has been sent from the same suspicious IP address. Let's investigate this email. Notice that the attacker has sent an email with a specific subject, and the subject says, can you share all contacts working on a specific project, Project Falcon or something like that, to certain senders. Definitely looks suspicious. Again, I can copy this email's internet message ID from here, and I can do a content search to see the email's exact contents and also the recipients of this email. Let's also see if the attacker has been deleting any emails from Joni's mailbox. So for this, select the activities moved messages to deleted items folder and deleted messages from deleted items folder. Select the date range and then click on search. I can see some delete activities performed from that suspicious IP address. Looks like the attacker has moved a message to delete folder and then deleted messages from the deleted items folder. So let's investigate this. Notice the internet message ID and the subject of the mail. Yep, as expected, the attacker first sent this same email from Joni's mailbox and then deleted that mail in order to erase their track so that Joni doesn't come to know about it. We can also find out if the attacker was searching for any specific keywords or queries in SharePoint or Exchange. So for this, under activities, choose performed email search and performed SharePoint search. Select the date range and I'm going to search. So two searches have been performed by the attacker in Exchange and SharePoint from that same suspicious IP address. Let's investigate those. So this is an audit log record for SharePoint search. Notice the query text here. The attacker is looking for information about Project Falcon. So maybe this Project Falcon is a confidential project in the organization and this attacker is desperately trying to look for that information. This is the audit log record for email search. Notice the query text again. The attacker is looking for the same keyword called Project Falcon.